Namaste and good evening. Welcome to our continuing series on the Life Divine with our beloved Ranga. We are continuing in Mind and Supermind. We've come a bit of ways, chapter 18.
Okay, so the page is 175. Depends on your edition. Either 174 or 175, and the paragraph, that apprehending consciousness. So we'll read the paragraph first.
Good.
And then we'll come back to it. That apprehending consciousness, the prajnana, places, as we have seen, the working of the indivisible all, active and formative, as a process and object of creative knowledge before the consciousness of the same all, originating and cognizant as the possessor and witness of its own working. Somewhat as a poet views the creations of his own consciousness placed before him in it, as if they were things other than the creator and his creative force. Yet all the time they are really no more than the play of self-formation of his own being in itself, and are indivisible there from their creator. Thus, prajnana makes the fundamental division which leads to all the rest, the division of the Purusha, the conscious soul who knows and sees and by his vision creates and ordains, and the Prakriti, the force soul or nature soul, which is his knowledge and his vision, his creation and his all-ordaining power. Both are one being, one existence, and the forms seen and created are multiple forms of that being, which are placed by him as knowledge before himself as knower, by himself as force before himself as creator. The last action of this apprehending consciousness takes place when the Purusha, pervading the conscious extension of his being, present at every point of himself as well as in his totality, inhabiting every form, regards the whole as if separately from each of the standpoints he has taken. He views and governs the relations of each soul form of himself with other soul forms from the standpoint of will and knowledge appropriate to each particular form. Language is always a little difficult.
Very difficult. This one is challenging.
But basically what he is saying is that he is referring back, that's why he gave you the triple status of the supermind. In the triple status of supermind, he is explaining how the one becomes the many, how the formless becomes form, how the that which is one becomes the many. So, the first, the triple status, the first is the oneness, but with the potential to become the many. Above that supermind is the absolute oneness, which is not part of the supermind. So, you have the absolute oneness. He says very clearly, the supermind is not the Unitarian consciousness. The Unitarian consciousness is above. The supermind, when there is a seeming unity, it has the potential to become the many. It is slightly different from the other one. Then the second level, the many start appearing in it. That oneness, which is a sort of blank slate, starts developing features. That is what he is calling the apprehending consciousness and the prajnana. In the third level, the features, the differences, the many start becoming more prominent. And when it comes down to the overmind level, the many are the most prominent thing. There is a background consciousness of unity, but the multiplicity is more common at the overmind level. So this is what he is describing, and he is giving an interesting example. He is saying like a poet, he creates all the poetry within himself. It is all within himself only, and yet they seem to be separate from him. He is visualizing all the poems that he is going to write. So he has created something, they are part of him, and yet they are separate from him, and he is viewing them.
Now I have serious question on that, having written 1,500 poems. Very often I felt it was Sri Aurobindo who was sending them through me, and I did not feel any personal attachment to them. And at times 15, 20, 30 poems would come at once. I'm not a poet. How do we explain that part? I've never studied poetry. I don't know the mechanics of poetry.
Yeah. So, when the poem is coming, you are seeing it, now you are writing it down, you are visualizing it?
No.
You are not visualizing it?
No. I just wrote it like that.
You are something outside the province of this, what is describing.
Oh, dear. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's very good. So,
no, I never saw it. The words came.
And you just write down.
And I wrote them down. And then when there was a problem, and Sri Aurobindo says, don't use the mind to resolve a problem, I went to Amal. And I said, what do I do? He said, appeal.
Appeal to headquarters.
And then he became very quiet. And then he said to me, if you are patient, there will always be an answer.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's how I worked on the poems.
An idea just struck me about your. So what Sri Aurobindo is describing is the origin of the poetry which you are receiving. So he is not describing your condition, he is describing the condition where poetry is formed.
Ah, okay.
That's what he is describing. So when it is coming down into you, that's another thing, another phenomenon altogether. But he is describing the creation of the world, the creation of the universe. So you are in the universe, that process is up there, he is describing that process, and you are receiving it here. So what he is describing is not your condition, but the origin of the poetry there.
Okay.
It's all one. The consciousness and the force are one. And the consciousness and force is like the force. The consciousness separates itself from the force. It's almost like I want to see what I can make. The consciousness, force and substance are all one. And even Ananda is one. But the consciousness sees, if it has to separate itself, if it has to create, it has to use its force. But if it has to use its force, consciousness to see and use its force, separate, obviously it is something else than itself. But within itself, consciousness separates itself from force, looks at it and sees what it can produce. So this is the origin of the multiplicity, the separation, the starting of the separation. In biology you would probably call it a stem cell, where the separation of all the tissue starts. When you start with one single cell, it is all just one. You don't see the multiplicity, you don't see the tissue of hair, you don't see the tissue of skin, you don't see the tissue of bone, but it's all there. That's the primary status, the first status of the soul mind. In the second status, the differences are becoming obvious. That's, in biology, it will be the equivalent of the stem cell.
So, could we read that poet part again?
Yes, that's right.
Somewhat as a poet.
Yeah. So, it's a fifth line from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somewhat as a poet views the creations of his own consciousness placed before him in his consciousness, as if they were things other than the creator and his creative force, yet all the time they are really no more than the play of self-formation of his own being in itself and are indivisible there from their creator. You could also think of it in another way. Suppose I am an architect and I want to build a house. I picture to myself what I am going to create.
You picture to yourself.
Yeah.
I never pictured.
Yeah. That's why yours is he is describing the origin of all these things. At your level, you are receiving it. That's not what he is describing. In fact, if your experience, he would say that you are receiving from on top. You are receiving all the knowledge is there already in the universe, and when you are opening yourself, it is just coming in. You remember we spoke the other day about his knowledge coming down right into his pen.
Yes.
Yeah, he's not even thinking, not even through he's coming out into his pen and he's writing.
This is interesting because when I had my recent surgery, Dr. Gajiwala was speaking to the nurse, and of course I was wide awake. I was just local anesthetic. And he says to her, "When you use a pen, where do you concentrate?" She says, "On the point." He said, "That's what you do in the surgery also." So he made her concentrate on exactly what he was when he was cutting me. Very interesting. You concentrate there.
Yeah. So you were asking about prajnana. So there is a note there. He describes 5 types of knowledge. 5 types of knowledge. Sanjnana, sense knowledge. Ajnana, mind knowledge. Prajnana, secondary status of supermind. He calls it wisdom. Then you have Vijnana, discrimination at the supramental level. And finally, Jnana, knowledge by identity. This is, he is going from below. If you want to go from on top, first is the Jnana, knowledge by identity. Okay? Then you come to the supermind. Vijnana, discrimination in the supermind. Then, one step below, second status of the supermind, Prajnana. Second status of the supermind, wisdom. There is multiplicity, but there is a background of unity. Unity is more prominent than the multiplicity. In the third level, multiplicity is more prominent than the unity. So these are the 5 terms that he uses. He explains that in the philosophy of the Upanishads.
I have a question on the first N. It's not pronounced?
Which one?
Prajnana or Prajana?
Pranjana. It is J and Y combined. Like you have...
Prajnana.
No, you don't say Prajnana.
You don't say the N.
Because that's the only way we can write in English. There is no other way of writing in English.
Ah.
Ya.
Yeah.
Prajnana. There is no Y in it, but it is J and Y. Like you have, if you have T, the nasal corresponding nasal is a Na.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So you have to combine the two. So here the first letter is J, Ch, J, J, Y. Y is a corresponding nasal. So you have to combine that. Y, Jnana.
I thought it was Pragnana.
No, you don't pronounce it like that. This was told to us by, we also used to say that.
Yeah.
Pragyana and all that. But it's not. Neither it is Prajnana, it is not Prajnana, neither is it Pragyana. It is Prajnana. It's a J, it's not a G.
Ah, okay.
So this was explained to us by Vedalankar, Jagannathji, who is a super expert in Sanskrit. He is the one who taught us this. Prajnana, Sanjnana, Ajnana, Vijnana. You don't say Jnana. In Hindi you would say Jnana, Jnana. And how do you write it? Is it G or a J?
There's a special letter in the...
Combined.
No, there's a special letter for gear.
No, like this. Nyo.
Ah.
In Marathi it is known as Prajnano. Nyan.
In Sanskrit you pronounce it like that. Jnana, Jnana, Prajnana.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so it's clear what he's saying? It starts this is the description of the creation of the universe. First there is a oneness, total oneness. And out of that oneness, these things are made. It's like we gave several examples, like if you have molten metal, for instance, okay, molten steel, it's all one. But you can solidify it and make all sorts of different things out of it. You can make plates, you can make wires, you can make railway tracks, you can do so many things. So that one molten metal starts becoming different features it takes on. The one becomes the many. That's what he's describing. He's describing the secondary status of the soul mind. So then he also, towards the end, he's saying, there is another thing also here. Then Purusha and Prakriti also separate themselves here. That which was one starts, all the multiplities are separating. Consciousness and force are one, so they separate themselves. Consciousness becomes Purusha, force becomes Prakriti. And consciousness tells Prakriti what to produce and looks at it. And after Prakriti produces the multiplicity, consciousness, Purusha, enters into each one separately and starts looking at what it has produced in the world from each center separately. So you are looking at the physical world, it is the supermind which has entered into you and is looking all around. But it is forgotten from where it has come. So he doesn't want to see the world only from one angle, he wants to see it from 1,000 million angles. So he enters into each one and starts looking around himself. That's what he's saying. See, let's see. The last action of the apprehending consciousness takes place when the Purusha, pervading the conscious extension of his being, the conscious extension, the universe, the conscious extension of his being, present at every point of himself as well as in his totality. He is there everywhere and yet he is there in each thing separately. That's the prajnana. So, inhabiting each form, regards the whole as if separately from each of the standpoints he has taken. So he is looking at it from all the creatures that he has created, each creature looking at what is around itself. But at our level we are ignorantly looking. At that level, at the prajnana level, he is fully conscious. He is seeing everything that he has himself created and he is seeing it from each different angle. That one soul becomes 100 million souls and each soul is looking at each other thing all around.
But Sri Aurobindo does say as if separately.
Yes, as if separately because there is a unity. That's right. This as if separately, yeah, there are so many examples we can give. Like usually they give the example of the kaleidoscope. Okay, there is only one bead, but you see it 6 times. So that which is you are seeing seems to be different. There is another way of looking at it. Look at our bodies. Essentially all matter, but still we see your body, your body, your body separately. And this essentially it's all one. Same thing with the vital, same thing with the mind, same thing with the souls also. All the souls are really one, seeming to be separate. But you can go to a level where you see the oneness. If you enter the self, you start seeing the oneness of things.
Then in that oneness, where is distinction of being?
Those are the 3 levels, exactly.
Right.
Those are the 3 levels.
Right.
In the highest supermind, there is no distinction. It's all just one. In the second one, the distinctions are beginning.
Right.
In the third one, the distinctions are more prominent than the unity behind. That's exactly what he's describing. At our level, total distinction, ignorance. We have forgotten that we are actually one. Okay? So, and there's another interesting word that he has used in the last one, third line from the bottom, not exactly line. He views and governs the relation of each soul form of himself with other soul forms from the standpoint of will and knowledge appropriate to each particular form. Each form has got a different will and a different knowledge. So it's looking at your will, your will, your will separately, your knowledge, your knowledge, your knowledge. At our level, there is strife and there is difference. But at the prajnana level, there is total harmony. Your will is different, my will is different, your will is different, but there is no clash. At that, because the unity is there in the background.
So the wills remain different,
Yes,
but there's no clash.
yeah. At the second level and third level. Below that, the multiplicity begins, and at our level, there is apparent clash. There is really no clash. Ramda explains that very well. He says it is the evolutionary process which you feel there is a clash. Actually, it's a working out of forces, he says. It's not a clash. It's not disharmony. It's a working out towards the unity.
Violence, killing,
Pardon?
murder, violence.
Yes. Those are just, this we have discussed also, and you will see again he will
We have.
talk it. Yeah. It is action. We discussed this earlier also. From the supreme point of view, a soft, gentle, affectionate patting on the lip, on the cheeks is one action. That same action can become violent if you take it to the extreme level, a slap. From that point of view, it's only action. Soft action, high action. Sweetness, murder. From his point of view, no difference. It is just action in different categories. Just action. He is saying only action. At our level, we are saying good and bad. But from his point of view, it's not good and bad. It is just a soft breeze and a cyclone. The force is soft and the force is hard. We are looking at the consequences and we jump to conclusions. Bad, good, this, that. But from his point of view, there is no difference.
About this last three lines, the thought came to me that sometimes we feel that we are separated and we are by ourselves. But here he says governs really of each soul, and from standpoint of knowledge appropriate to each particular form.
Yes. But
so it means that he is governing us, and this is the...
Yes, but this governing is taking place at that second status of the soul mind. At this level, there is a governance, but we don't see it. The psychic is trying to govern you. But in the meanwhile, Prakriti has come and you are identifying yourself with Prakriti, and therefore there is ignorance. But if you identify yourself with the soul, then you will see that this is only a surface crust. And you are actually, the soul has always been guiding you. But we don't receive the guidance always.
It's a good point you make, though. Very good point, yes.
But the real governing is at that level. It governs.
This is happening, but because of our ignorance, we are not aware of it.
That's right.
And we are not abandoned here.
No, that's
And
important.
he is working through each soul.
Yes,
Relationship with every other soul.
Yes.
From the point of view of knowledge.
that's right.
Appropriate to it.
Point of view of knowledge, point of view of will,
Yes.
point of view of ananda also. He is enjoying each one's separate ananda.
And there are moments when we feel that.
Yes.
Maybe only moments,
Yes.
but there are moments.
Yes. Okay, so this is interesting from the standpoint of will and knowledge appropriate to each particular form. Each one, the knowledge is different, what you have
It's
been.
good for me, not good for other souls.
Exactly.
So that's right.
Yeah.
Now, each particular form doesn't have to be human.
No, that's another
It can
point.
be all forms.
That's right. That's why you have, even at the material level, one form is oxygen, one form is hydrogen, one form is uranium, plutonium, all different. So exactly in the same way, the human beings also, even insects, there are 100 types of insects. There are 100, multiplicity is there everywhere. And each one is given its own characteristics. And these characteristics are all decided where? At that prajna level. The blueprint of all these things, this is what I will create. Okay, this is what I will create.
But insects have their projection from vital world, no? Or from insects and all that. They are from.
They are at the vital world level.
But are there no projection of vital world? Insects.
They express the vitality. They express the vitality. Just as the atoms express, the elements express the physicality.
So their characteristic also comes from Prajnana.
Yes, it is planned from there. It is planned from there. At this level, they represent what they are, in which level they are. It's like the stratification of the soul.
Uh,
We represent the mentality.
I'd like to share something because I wrote to Mother about this. When we began the Matrimandir Gardens nursery, the insects had a feast. They had never tasted plants so different and so wonderful. So I wrote to Mother, I said, is there a conscious hostility in the insect world? And Mother said, no, it's not like that. It's just as it is. Insects do good and they do bad. Obviously, they pollinate. They do all kinds of good things. The bees are out there. Other insects pollinate flowers and vegetables. So Mother was very clear. There's
That's
no
exactly
conscious
what-
hostility.
Appropriate to each. The bees are, their appropriate work is to pollinate. At the same time, they've got other. And again, that good and bad, again we come back to the same thing. We are seeing the good and bad. From the divine point of view, there is no good and bad. There are only different types of actions. Poison can kill or cure. So, we are seeing good and bad and things like that. There are so many different types of things.
A very long one.
Okay. We'll read it. It's about the same line. Thus, the elements of division have come into being at the secondary level. At the primary level, oneness. At the secondary level, elements of division have come into being. First, the infinity of the one has translated itself into an extension in conceptual time and space. Secondly, the omnipresence of the one in that self-conscious extension translates itself into a multiplicity of the conscious soul, the many Purushas of the Sankhya. Thirdly, the multiplicity of soul forms has translated itself into a divided habitation of the extended unity. This divided habitation is inevitable the moment these multiple Purushas do not each inhabit a separate world of its own, do not each possess a separate Prakriti, building a separate universe, but rather all enjoy the same Prakriti, as they must do, being only soul forms of the one presiding over the multiple creations of his power. Yet have relations with each other in the one world of being created by the one Prakriti. The Purusha in each form actively identifies himself with each. He delimits himself in that and sets off his other forms against it in his consciousness as containing his other selves, which are identical with him in being but different in relation, different in the various extent, various range of movement, and various view of the one substance, force, consciousness, delight, which each is actually deploying at any given moment of time or in any given field of space. Granted that in the divine existence, perfectly aware of itself, this is not a binding limitation, not an identification to which the soul becomes enslaved and which it cannot exceed, as we are enslaved to our self-identification with the body and unable to exceed the limitation of our conscious ego, unable to escape from a particular movement of our consciousness in time, determining our particular field in space. Granted all this, still there is a free identification from moment to moment, which only the inalienable self-knowledge of the divine soul prevents from fixing itself in an apparently rigid chain of separation and time succession, such as that in which our consciousness seems to be fixed and changed. He is describing a huge thing, but what he is basically, I think, saying, what I understand, that although there is separation, that separation is not essential. Anytime it would go back to the unity. It can see the unity and it can see both. But that separation is there, and yet it is not bound by the separation as we are bound. We are bound to our separation. However much I may conceive of myself being the same as all of you, yet practically I can't do it. So we are bound to our separation. There is no binding in the separation at that level. He is still describing the second status. I think that's what he's saying.
I'd like to go back a little bit and ask about the Purusha Prakriti in the terms of Sri Aurobindo and Mother. All of us are told, give everything to Mother, offer everything to Mother, she is everything. But Mother tells us that when you can see Sri Aurobindo and myself as one, then you are making progress.
Not only progress, that's the only condition in which you can go to the supermind. That's what she says. If you can't see Sri Aurobindo and myself as one, you will not be able to go to supermind. It's only in the supermind that Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and force, become totally one.
But then what about the idea that the Shakti is forward and the Purusha is back?
At the lower levels. At the lower levels. At the overmind level, however high spiritually it may be, yet there is difference. That's why Sri Aurobindo says that the overmind is still in the ignorance. It's a level of the ignorance. Only the supermind is not ignorance. Ignorance is defined as seeing the multiplicity. Yes, Mother says that. She says you have to constantly see. But if you can, in your consciousness, really see Sri Aurobindo and myself as really one, that's the only condition you can reach to the supermind. Otherwise you can't. I just read that recently, so I remember. It's fresh in my mind. She says that's the condition in which you can go there. Because Purusha and Prakriti become one. At the different levels, different. They are separate. Even at the self, even at the overmind level, all these levels, you see Purusha and Prakriti as separate. Both are real, but you see them as separate. In fact, for Sri Aurobindo, he writes in one letter to Dilip Kumar Roy. Dilip Kumar Roy had doubts. So he says, what doubts you have? I had gigantic doubts. I had gigantic doubts. And that is the doubt is when you are from the higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind and overmind, when you are in that range, you are seeing that both Saguna and Nirguna are all real. But which is the starting point? Is it from matter or is it from above? You don't know. Because there is a great similarity between the two. The origination of all this is coming from matter or is it coming from on top? Only when you go to the supramental level you realize that this also is creating, that also is creating, but that is more fundamental than this one. That is the one that has to create everything. This also is creating. But if matter disappears, spirit won't disappear. But if spirit disappears, everything will disappear. That is more fundamental than this. In fact, spirit and matter, the superconscient and the inconscient, are similar in so many ways. But the priority is more to that one than this one. That's what he says. Okay, so all this description that he is describing is at that supermind level. So, although he has become separate, he is still governing everything with his identity, with his background of unity. He is consciously producing you, me at that level, and he knows exactly what he is doing. So he is in full control. At our level, that control seems to have gone. Thus, the de-piecing is already there. The relation of form with form, as if they were separate beings, of will of being with will of being, as if they were separate forces, of knowledge of being with knowledge of being, as if they were separate consciousnesses, has already been founded. So it's at that level where the separations has started. It's been well founded, the separations. It is yet only as if. It is yet only as if.
yes.
In other words, difference is there, yet that oneness also is there. I like to picture this very often in this way, like a jigsaw puzzle. You see a picture, okay, and you draw the lines where you want to cut. The lines are there, okay. So this is only in the picture. The image is not a very good one because picture means there is multiplicity, but there is no multiplicity. But it is one picture. Then the lines are drawn for the separation. In the third one, all the pieces are separated. Yeah, something like that. So here it is as if separated, but actually the picture is still there, the oneness. Yet, it is as yet only as if, for the divine soul is not deluded. It is aware of all as phenomenon of being and keeps hold of its existence in the reality of being. It does not forfeit its unity. It uses mind as a subordinate action of the infinite knowledge. A definition of things subordinate to its awareness of infinity. A delimitation dependent on its awareness of essential totality. Not that apparent and pluralistic totality and sum and collective aggregation, which is only another phenomenon of mind. That's our level. Thus, there is no real limitation. The soul uses its defining power for the play of well-distinguished forms and forces and is not used by that power. So,
Oh, so I have to ask you, do you have a definition for de-piecing?
yeah, deep peace. I think he has invented the word.
I think so too.
He has not, there is no such word. But again, as usual, when he invents a word, it is so clear what his meaning.
Yes.
To make into pieces. To piece together, de-piece. That's right. Yeah, I was reading, I'm going a little off the subject, but it's very interesting because how Sri Aurobindo uses words. He has used a word in the Essays on the Gita, immanuable. Immanuable. And when he was reading that, this is a story told by Arindam Basu. Arindam Basu was giving a lecture in Savitri Bhavan, and he was giving a lecture on that, and then this word came, immanuable. Someone asked, what is the meaning of immanuable? And he said, I have to check the dictionary, but he felt as though Sri Aurobindo was whispering into his ear, that which cannot be made smaller. He felt like that. So, immanuable, that which cannot. He heard a voice whispering into his ear, saying, this is the meaning. He's taking it from Latin.
He wrote to Mother, and he showed me that letter, where he says to Mother, in all my talks, I'm beginning more and more to feel that it is Sri Aurobindo speaking through me, and not me speaking. And Mother said, the more you open to him, the more he will speak through you.
Yeah. You know, towards the end of his life, he started, actually his name is Aurobindo Basu. Aurobindo Basu was his name. But in those days, anyone with the name Meera, the name was changed. Okay? And anyone with the name Aurobindo, the name was changed. Our person who stays at our house, his name was Aurobindo, but his name was Parikshit. Then Arindam Basu, his name was changed to Arindam Basu. Actually, he is Aurobindo Basu. Towards the end of his life, this is what he started calling himself, Sri Aurobindo. I know that for a fact, because he came one day in the press, and I said, what name should I use for the job that I am going to do for you? He said, Sri Aurobindo. Including Sri Aurobindo. So what you are saying just now, that he felt that Sri Aurobindo is speaking through him.
Well, he was my greatest contact other than Nolini. he would come to me week after week at night and teach me things that I have no recollection of. And he would bring my parents on remember the parapet we used to have on the beach?
Yes.
And he would sit them there on the beach and he would tell me why I chose them and tell me all these things. And every time I approached him in front of the ashram, he would never say a word. I could be angry as anything, he would never say a word. Except one time. That night, there was a huge parrot. And I said, this morning you have to tell me the meaning of that parrot. And he said, you talk too much. That's the only answer he ever gave me. So, you went off subject wonderfully.
Yeah. So the de-piecing instead of those coining, he has coined it. Okay? So, he is saying that in the secondary status of the supermind, there is division, yet there is no division. In other words, it's seeming division. Now he says, the last sentence I am reading again, thus there is no real limitation. The soul uses its defining power. Defining power. The soul has the power to separate itself and define itself for the play of well-distinguished forms and forces, and is not used by that power. A new factor, a new action of conscious force is therefore needed to create the operation of a helplessly limited as opposed to a freely limiting mind. That is to say, of mind subject to its own play and deceived by it, as opposed to mind master of its own play and viewing it in its truth, the creature mind as opposed to the divine. That new factor is avidya, the self-ignoring faculty which separates the action of mind from the action of supermind that originated and still governs it from behind the veil. Thus separated, mind perceives only the particular and not the universal, or conceives only the particular in an unpossessed universal, and no longer both particular and universal as phenomena of the infinite. Thus, we have the limited mind which views every phenomenon as a thing in itself, separate part of a whole which again exists separately in a greater whole, and so on, enlarging always its aggregates without getting back to the sense of a true unity. This is the description of the Maya at the overmind level.
True infinity.
Yeah. That which is aware of the separation as well as the oneness is the divine consciousness, but it has to now, that consciousness of the unity has to be veiled. That power is avidya, that is the Maya. So you forget the oneness and you realize only the limited individuality. That is our condition. So we are governed by the power of Maya, the power of avidya. Avidya is the power of consciousness. He says very interestingly, ignorance is a power of knowledge to reduce itself and hide itself. So ignorance, we see it as something negative, but from his point of view, it's not negative. Light, I am going to reduce light and make it darkness. It is light only, but I am seeing different grades of light. And the extreme grades of light is super light and super darkness. Oneness there, multiplicity here. Both are equally divine. Okay? So, mind with an M cap. So, this is what he is describing at the overmind level. Now he has come down to that third level and he has come down even more. Mind being an action of the infinite, de-pieces as well as aggregates ad infinitum. It cuts up beings into wholes, into ever smaller wholes, into atoms, and those atoms into primal atoms until it would, if it could, dissolve the primal atom into nothingness. But it cannot, because behind this dividing mind is a saving knowledge of the supermental, which knows every whole, every atom to be only a concentration of all force, of the all consciousness, of all being into phenomenal forms of itself. The dissolution of the aggregate into an infinite nothingness at which mind seems to arrive is to the supermind only the return of the self-concentrating conscious being out of its phenomenon into its infinite existence. Whichever way its consciousness proceeds, by way of infinite division or by way of infinite enlargement, it arrives only at itself, at its own infinite unity and eternal being. And when the action of the mind is consciously subordinate to this knowledge of the supermind, the truth of the process is known to it also and not at all ignored. There is no real division, but only an infinitely multiple concentration into forms of being and into arrangements of the relation of those forms of being to each other, in which division is a subordinate appearance of the whole process necessary to the spatial and temporal play. For divide as you will, get down to the most infinitesimal atom or form, the most monstrous possible aggregate of worlds and systems, you cannot get by either process to a thing in itself. All are forms of a force which alone is real in itself, while the rest are real only as self-imagings or manifesting self-forms of the eternal force consciousness. The process of multiplication, the process of division continues until finally you have the atoms. And that's very interesting because in science, atom is described as the smallest indivisible particle. That's what science thought at one time, that the atom is that which is the smallest particle. Then they have discovered that the atom has got a nucleus and there are electrons and now there are other particles and all. So now in recent times they have started that huge, in Switzerland, that huge 24 or 27 mile tunnel under the Alps. They are trying to find the last particle, the God particle which they call. Okay? They'll never find it. That's what he's saying. Because as you go on, dividing, you'll come back to that oneness only.
Yes.
So you go up, there is oneness. You come down, divide, all the divisions are gone and you become one. So that God particle which they are trying to find, they'll never find it. Because it's infinitely, it can go on. And even if you see it from the other point of view, if you take a picture nowadays, what we have in a television, we have definition, high definition pictures. Suppose you have, you take a picture and if you want to reproduce it, you have to break it down into pixels. The more pixels there are, the more high definition the picture becomes. In fact, if you have infinite pixels, the picture will be the clearest and the most continuous. Otherwise, it will be a broken picture. Like sometimes in the earlier days, in newspapers, what you call the screen. So, 120 screen, 150 screen. Nowadays, they use 1080 and 720 pixels.
Right.
Yeah. If you do 720 on your TV screen, it's quite continuous. But if you go to high definitions, it becomes even clearer and even more sharp. So, in either way, you go up, there is oneness. You come down, there is oneness. That's what he's saying. I think that's what he's saying. Okay.